Usually I go into a monologue here, and we'll get to that point, but let's toss it to Jacob Beck here first. Beck, you haven't been prepped on this, but I feel like you can handle it. How would you say that LSU's tight end has played the last 3 years?
Well, Mason Taylor was pretty good. Probably the best, one of the best tight ends in school history.
That's exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you, Jacob Beck, for
You're
that
welcome.
chiming in.
Okay.
And that's what I think most every LSU fan, people that cover the team, would answer, and I would completely agree. Mason Taylor is the most productive tight end in the history of LSU football. And when you lose someone at any position across any sport that has been as productive as anyone else in that position in that sport, the reasonable expectation would be that once that player moves on, you're going to have a really hard time filling those shoes. And as I look at it closely and I start to look at statistics and then start to observe what LSU is going to try to do in Mason Taylor's absence, I don't think LSU is going to take a step back at all. At all. And I have a few reasons for that. Now, Joe Sloan met with the media today, and we're going to hear some of his thoughts on what he's seen from LSU's tight ends. But to kind of preface the conversation, you understand where LSU is at tight end. Trades Green returns. And you know that he's a freak of nature at 6'7" that can run and jump and literally play SEC basketball. You've got Bauer Sharp, who's a fifth-year college player, who's big and physical and a good athlete, who started as a college quarterback at Southeastern and transitioned to tight end there and then went to Oklahoma and played in that abysmal offense last year, but did lead them in receiving. And you bring in Donovan Green as well, who had a really nice first season at Texas A&M before some injuries derailed his time there in College Station. But he comes back as a fourth-year college player. And then you've got J.D. LaFleur, who will come in as a big physical tight end, and he's got pretty good pedigree. His dad was about as productive as Mason Taylor as a tight end at LSU. So that's what LSU has to work with moving on from Mason Taylor. Before you hear why I don't think LSU is going to step back at all at the tight end spot, let's hear what Joe Sloan believes to be his tight end room and how he feels that group is progressing right now in the spring.
Adding in Bauer and Donovan, but Trades being back and the growth that he's had, the way he's practiced this spring as a complete player, he's pretty electric. So, and the way Bauer's come in, I think Coach spoke the other day, I saw where he made a comment about his mentality. I think that's been excellent for us. And Donovan's been a very experienced guy that has a level head and can kind of bring a calm, cool demeanor to the group. So I think there's a lot of different pieces that are exciting about that group.
Those guys right now are working with Alex Atkins, who is the new position coach at tight end. You had Slade Nagel move on, and Alex Atkins moves in. Atkins has an offensive line and offensive coordinator background, but he's working with the tight end. And they're very much doing a lot of work in the running game, but certainly you're doing some work out on the perimeter as well. And I believe that you've got a really nice set of skills between the entirety of the group. Bauer Sharp physically resembles Mason Taylor to an extent. Mason Taylor, 6'5", 255. That's pretty much ideal size for a tight end. 6'5", 255 that's plenty tall enough. That's plenty big a frame. And Mason Taylor had to grow into that over his 3 years at LSU, but he did and really looked the part. Bauer Sharp is listed at 6'5", 250. So basically exactly the same. And I think Bauer Sharp, as far as his athleticism goes, is similar to Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor wasn't a great leaper. He wasn't a straight-line sprinter. I mean, he's a three-star recruit coming out of high school. Now, he's got some pretty good genes. Dad's in the Hall of Fame. But just a solid player. And Bauer Sharp brings a lot of that without the productivity that Mason Taylor had at LSU. And then you got Trades Green, who is 6'7", and is an elite leaper and can run, is a little bit slender to get down there and block consistently like those guys do, but he's working towards that. And then you got Donovan Green, who is a big physical presence like Sharp would be and can certainly get in there and help in the run game. But what Joe Sloan has enjoyed is kind of the guys working together this spring, and that's what he talked about with Bauer Sharp and Trades Green.
The cool thing is Bauer and Trades have really hit it off. just how those guys are pushing each other and competing with each other. They both have excellent skill sets on the perimeter, but at the same point in time, I think they bring a little bit different things, when it comes athletically. I've heard people describe a tight end room as that you want like a basketball team, right? Everybody can't be the same because we're going to have a lot of different assignments and roles that we ask those guys to play. And I think when you look back what Coach Kelly's done with tight ends and now what we've done with tight ends since we've been here.
And that's kind of the point, is that Brian Kelly has always had really productive tight ends, dating back to his time at Notre Dame where they were just churning those guys into the NFL. And you look at what Mason Taylor did over his 3 years at LSU. His freshman year, 36 catches, 348 yards, 1 touchdown. As a freshman. They really didn't have any other options, so they went with him. As a sophomore, Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman Trophy. What does Mason Taylor do that year? 55 catches, 546 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nothing crazy. He had about 4.5 catches per game, had about 10 yards per catch, about 45 yards per game. That's what Mason Taylor – I flipped that. That's what Mason Taylor gave you. I flipped the senior year and freshman year. They were backwards. But last year, so Mason Taylor last year in his final year at LSU, you're talking about a guy who had 546 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a season where he averaged 4.5 catches per game and 45 yards per game. That's not astronomical. And when I think about Brian Kelly's offense and what the tight end does and the skill set that they have, like, you wouldn't consider Mike Leach's next quarterback to be someone who couldn't fill in for the next one. They just the next guy just stepped up and did it. And I think that's kind of what Brian Kelly's tight ends have done. Yeah, the guy that's walking out the door was super productive. You just find the next guy. And I think that Bauer Sharp brings a lot of the same traits that Mason Taylor did. And I think what Trey'Dez Green brings is something completely different, where the upside is just massive. Like, Mason Taylor had 6 touchdowns in his career at LSU. Trey'Dez Green had 2 in the bowl game. He's a matchup problem. I didn't consider Mason Taylor a matchup problem. I considered Mason Taylor an incredible option for his quarterbacks to go to, whether it was Jaden Daniels or Garrett Nussmeier. He was consistently open, caught everything around, was huge on third downs. But, I wouldn't consider him a matchup nightmare. Trey'Dez Green, that's a nightmare for defensive coordinators. And when you look at what this tight end group could be, you don't even have to just bet on the upside of Trey'Dez Green because you have Bauer Sharp coming in to help. Mason Taylor kind of had to do everything last year and the year before and the year before. Now you've got some versatility. And as Joe Sloan talked about there, it's like, yeah, you want it to be like a basketball team. You don't want everybody doing the kind of same thing. And that's what you've got. But Trey'Dez Green was the guy that he talked about last and basically said he can be really good.
I think you see the emergence of Trey'Dez as we got through the second half of the season, and then you watch his growth this offseason. And I think he's going to speak to the development of this program. His attitude is infectious, man. I mean, his attitude, the way he attacks things, is infectious. He can be as good as he wants to be, and he continues to push every day to do that. I couldn't be more proud of him and excited about him being here.
I've only spoken to Trey'Dez Green one time. And that one time that I talked to Trey'Dez Green was with a group of media. When I pulled him off to the side in an exclusive interview. He was meeting with the media in the midweek. And he said during season, he's like, yeah, I'm working on blocking. I try to put a lot of work into that. And I took that seriously. I think that he understood, yeah, I'm really good at running and jumping and catching. In high school, I could go outside and run. They couldn't run with me and jump, and they couldn't jump with me. But, that's not the case anymore. And so to be the best I can be at this position, I'm going to have to be a little bit better blocker. And that quote that he gave stuck with me. And then Brian Kelly said, leading up to the bowl game, when Mason Taylor opted out, and then Kamorian Pimpton got in the transfer portal, so all you had was Trey'Dez Green. He was the only tight end on the roster. And Brian Kelly said that he was, physically banged up because of the December of practice, because of how many run reps he was doing. And remember, LSU was basically breaking an entire new offensive line with Trey'Dez Green in there, so they had to rep a lot in the run game to get those guys ready to play against Baylor. And Trey'Dez Green went in there and didn't complain and got physical. And he's still not a great blocker by all accounts at this point, but he's willing. And that's the most important thing at this point. Because if you're not willing to try, if you're not willing to do it, then it's not going to work. Well, he's willing to try, and he's going to get better. And now he's got some help because Bauer Sharp and Donovan Green can certainly do it. And J.D. LaFleur is going to come in at like 260 pounds. Like, he may be able to. So I think that now that you've got a full position group there and not basically just Mason Taylor doing everything, I think you look at what Mason Taylor did, averaged about 500 yards and 2 touchdowns a year, and became the most productive player in the school's history at that position. Like, those two things don't sound like they go together. So if you just look at, oh, he's the most productive tight end ever, you would think, oh, well, they've got to take a step back there. But if you just consider what he actually did, which was great, it's very much attainable for this tight end group. And I think LSU's tight end play this year is going to be as productive as Mason Taylor was. You're just going to put all those numbers together as opposed to dropping them all in one player's lap. And I feel like that's not an unreasonable expectation that LSU would have really, really strong tight end production this year, even with maybe the best in school history moving on. That's my thought on the LSU tight end position group. I'll have a story up on it on LouisianaSports.net tomorrow as we kind of dive further into spring football. Joe Sloan met with the media today, so I've got a piece coming up on the running game later this afternoon on LouisianaSports.net, and then we'll go to tight ends tomorrow, but I wanted to open that way today. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.